In 1519, Hernán Cortés stepped into Tenochtitlan, the beating heart of the Aztec Empire, and froze. Before him rose a city unlike anything he had imagined, an island metropolis of 200,000 souls, shimmering atop a vast lake, canals cut through its streets like veins of silver. Fresh water coursed through clay pipes. On the lake's surface, gardens swayed and bloomed, feeding thousands. And above it all rose temples and towers, stark white against the sky. Cortés had seen Havana. He had seen Seville, but nothing on earth prepared him for this. Before we begin tonight's story, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps other sleepy souls find this content. And let us know in the comments which historical figure you'd like us to cover next. Now, the Aztecs had built something extraordinary in the Valley of Mexico. Just 200 years earlier, they had been nobody. Wanderers from the north, mercenaries who fought other people's wars. The established cities of the valley barely tolerated them. They were given the worst land available, a swampy island covered in snakes and mosquitoes. From that miserable island, they built an empire. By the time Cortés arrived, they ruled from the Atlantic to the Pacific. How did outcasts become emperors? How did a swamp become the center of the world? The answer lies not in destiny or prophecy, but in a series of brilliant adaptations, ruthless alliances, and the simple refusal to accept the place the world had assigned them. Tonight, we'll walk through their great markets where you could buy everything from jaguar pelts to holy mushrooms. We'll climb temple pyramids so steep that priests had to lean forward in submission to the gods. We'll witness both the glory of their flowering and the devastation of their fall, not to superior technology or tactics, but to diseases their bodies had never encountered and alliances they never saw coming. This is the story of the Aztec Empire. Chapter 1. The Trail from the Seven Caves. The year was 1299, and Shieldflower knew she was going to die. She had known it for weeks now, ever since her father's foolish rebellion had collapsed like wet clay in summer rain. The other tribes had crushed them completely. Now she stood in the great plaza of Culhuacan, watching the priests prepare the sacrificial fire while the crowd pressed in, eager for the spectacle. Her people call her Quimalxoquitl. For generations to come, they will remember this moment, not because she lived, but because of how she chose to die. Shieldflower's tribe had wandered south from the arid lands for 3 generations, following game and searching for water. They were among the last to arrive in the fertile basin of central Mexico, where the good land had already been claimed. The earlier tribes looked at these newcomers with suspicion. Here came another band of Chichimeca, the dog people, armed with bows and arrows, speaking a dialect of Nahuatl that marked them as outsiders. The established cities needed soldiers, though they hired Shieldflower's people as mercenaries. For 2 generations, her tribe fought other people's wars. Her father, Huitzilopochtli, had grown tired of this arrangement. He declared independence from their employers. It was a miscalculation that would cost him everything. The confederation of cities, led by King Coxcox, crushed the rebellion in a single battle. They killed most of the men. They took the women and children as slaves. Shieldflower was brought to Culhuacan to serve as a concubine. Instead, she demanded death. As the flames rose around her, she cried out to her enemies, "People of Culhuacan, I go to where my God lives. My people's descendants will become great warriors. You will see." The Mexica, as Shieldflower's people called themselves, would tell this story for centuries. They would tell it when they built their first temple on a swampy island nobody else wanted. They would tell it when they forged their triple alliance. They would tell it when they ruled an empire that stretched from sea to sea. To understand the Mexica people, who we know today as the Aztecs, you need to understand where they came from. Not the myths about emerging from 7 caves, though they told those stories too. The real history starts with people walking. Thousands of years of walking. The ancestors of all indigenous Americans crossed the Bering Land Bridge perhaps 20,000 years ago. They spread south through the continents in waves. Some settled early, others kept moving. By the time farming developed in central Mexico, around 3,000 years before Shieldflower's death, the pattern was set. The farmers claimed the best land. The hunters kept to the margins. The Aztecs belonged to this last group. While the Olmecs were carving colossal heads and the people of Teotihuacan were building pyramids that touched the clouds, the ancestors of the Aztecs were still following deer through the northern deserts. They gathered prickly pear and agave. They hunted rabbits with throwing sticks. Something changed around the year 1000. The bow and arrow arrived from the north. This new weapon gave the nomadic groups an advantage they had never possessed. They could strike from a distance. They could pierce the cotton armor worn by the settled peoples. The migration south accelerated. These Chichimeca came in waves. The Aztecs were among the last. By the time they reached the Valley of Mexico in the mid-1200s, every decent piece of land had been claimed. The established city-states controlled the lake shores and the fertile plains. The Aztecs found work where they could. They fished in the shallows. They collected salt. They fought as mercenaries. The ruins of older civilizations surrounded them. Teotihuacan had been abandoned for 500 years, but its pyramids still dominated the valley. The Aztecs walked among these ruins with awe. They believed this was where the gods had gathered to create the 5th sun, the current age of the world. A god named Nanahuatzin had thrown himself into a fire here, they said, and emerged as the sun itself. The Aztecs were not unique in claiming descent from ancient glory. Every people in the valley told stories connecting themselves to the Toltecs or the Teotihuacanos. But the Aztecs had something the others had lost. They remembered what it meant to have nothing. They remembered Shieldflower's defiance. This memory shaped everything that followed. When they finally built their city, they chose the worst land available, a marshy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. When they designed their society, they made room for advancement through military service. A commoner who captured 4 enemies could become a noble. A slave's son could rise to lead armies. They never forgot they were outsiders who had fought their way in. This knowledge made them hungry. It made them disciplined. It made them ruthless. Within 200 years of Shieldflower's death, her descendants would rule the largest empire in the history of Mesoamerica. People of Culhuacan, she had said, you will see. Chapter 2. A city born of swamp and strategy. The island nobody wanted became the center of an empire. In